Rise up and build. When I heard the theme of this year's convention, I knew immediately I wanted to talk about my dad again. If you were here last year to hear me speak, you heard me talk about my dad and being strong and courageous, admitting he had an addiction to drugs, and getting help with them. But the story doesn't end there. He was aware that he had to leave behind this destructive way of life and rebuild the relationships he had shattered due to his addiction. And he also knew that he'd be labeled as an addict and people would push him away because of this. But he also knew that as a Christian, if he repented, God would forgive him. But not only God would, but others would too. God would grant him the opportunity to build his life and the relationships that he had broken and rebuild them. In a lot of ways, you could say he's my hero and he's my inspiration. Seeing him and all the ways that he had failed and coming back to his faith and asking God for forgiveness proves to me that I can do that. Even if I do wrong, no matter what, God will still accept me. Even when everything has been destroyed, it is never too late to rise up and build again. The truth is that the Bible is filled with examples of when men and women were faced in obstacles that they didn't lose their faith and they turned to God for help. Two powerful examples of this shows up in Babylonian captivity. In 2 Kings 25, the Israelites have been pillaged by the Babylon. The Babylonians had completely decimated Jerusalem, destroying the walls, falling into piles of just crumbling rubble. And they burned everything else that was in the side of the city. After doing so, they would take the Israelites and they make them learn the Babylonian language and give them their own Babylonian names. Four examples that we see in the Bible of this are Daniel getting his name changed to Belteshazzar, Hananiah to Shadrach, Mishael to Meshach, and Azariah to Abednego. I don't know about y'all, but I know that I wouldn't like to be forced out of my place of living, be taught a completely new language, and have my name changed. Like, I love living where I do. I couldn't imagine going anywhere else, and I don't know if y'all feel the same way. But, so that means I would have to leave everything that I knew in the past and can't remember it because that's the only thing I know from before. I'm scared of losing people. And I bet that the Israelites were scared of losing people in their memories and in the past. These are just a few of the struggles that Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had to face during the Babylonian captivity. It was in that place of great destruction that they would find that they needed God more than ever. And when they find out that they needed God more than ever, they rose to build. It's funny how God works in that way, that he puts us through things that he knows we can handle just for us to turn to him, glorify his name, and rise up and build. In 1 Corinthians 10:13 it says, "No temptation has overtaken you except as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it." In Daniel chapter 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were tested by King Nebuchadnezzar when he had a statue of gold built for him. Nebuchadnezzar told them to bow down to the statue that was made for him in his honor. When they were told to, they refused to, glorifying God and raising up his name. Nebuchadnezzar would go on to give them multiple more chances, but they would still, each time, refuse to, raising God up. He gave him one last opportunity before he said, "If you do not accept this and bow down to me, I will throw you in the fiery furnace." They refused to again. After doing so, he made his men heat up the furnace 7 times hotter than it should be, killing the men that would heat it up. After they did that, Nebuchadnezzar had the men thrown into the furnace, and after he threw them in the furnace, he would realize that there were not just 3 men, there were 4. He told them to bring the men out. When they came out, the 3 of them, he saw that not even a hair on their body was singed. He saw that God had saved them from the furnace. He would make a decree, Nebuchadnezzar would, that all his surrounding kingdoms and all the places that he ruled over would be glorifying God. The second example is in Daniel chapter 6. When Daniel was faced with adversity, when the satraps and the governors would go to Darius saying, we need to make a decree, saying that you are the only man or idol or god worshipped for 30 days. And any other man that worships you, or any man that worships anyone besides you, he'll be thrown into the den of lions. With Daniel knowing this and being great friends with Darius, he still wanted to glorify God. So each day, 3 times a day, he would go up to the room, open the window facing Jerusalem, and pray 3 times a day. Well, with the satraps and the governors doing this, they were seeking to get Daniel gone. They didn't want him anymore. So when they did this, they spied on him every day. Well, after a few days, they went to Darius saying, hey, your man Daniel over here, he hasn't been following your law. So when they did this, Darius was displeased. But he knew that he made a decree that Daniel or anyone else that worshipped anyone besides Darius had to go. Darius was sad, but he commanded them to go get Daniel. And when they got Daniel, Daniel had to be thrown into the lion's den. Well, the night came, and over the night, Darius' sleep had just went from him. He lost his sleep. He couldn't eat, or he couldn't do anything but sit there and just mourn over Daniel. He got up early the next morning, and he went out to the den of lions. When he went out, he called out into the den, saying, Daniel, are you there? And when Daniel assured Darius that he was there, Darius was relieved. Darius would immediately call to the men and say, get Daniel out. After they would get Daniel out, he would command them to go get the satraps and the governors that would end up convincing him to make this decree. After he got them, he would also throw their wives and their kids into the den of lions. Now, there's more to that story, but I don't want to get into great detail about that. So, after that, Darius would see that God saved Daniel, and he would make a decree that all the kingdoms and all the things around him would worship the one true living God. And in that day, and for the rest of the remaining time of Darius, God would be glorified. History is filled with men and women whose decisions to walk by faith in difficult circumstances have inspired countless others to rise up and build. I like to think of it that people like Daniel inspired people like Nehemiah. And then Nehemiah inspired others until the New Testament Christians. And the New Testament Christians would go on to inspire people like us Christians, as in today's world. And people like Paul especially, even after what he did, he still rose up to build God's name after he killed so many innocent people that were just glorifying God. But this is where we see that not everyone accepts other people. But we need to go out and see and show them God's love. We need to go out and raise up God's name. My dad rose up to build, and this inspired me. And I pray that it will inspire each of you today. No matter where you are in your life, it is never too late to rise up and build.